what's happening in the environment these days? Would anyone want to make a commentary?
Which Kathy was asking him some of those interesting questions and how we as investors, as European investors, are seeing the situation. And it's a very sensitive topic. Immediately we'll get in the line of fire. That's why on one hand you have to be diplomatic, on the other hand you also have to share your concern with the general public. And I think our line is clear. It's not really creating more investment conducive environment that we are seeing at the moment. I think there are a lot of uncertainties already in the market. Sitira, for instance, what's going to happen, taxes are we going to pay when we put our money into the Philippines, what's happening now with the natural calamities, etc., etc. And then you have also a very strong messages sent by the government, by the administration, towards the private sector here in the country. And without knowing too many details of those contracts, we are saying, look, there is a contract, and the contract was done between the government, the previous administration, and the private sector company. I think there are other ways to go about it if you have issues with the existing contract. And that's basically our argument that you will do a lot of harm when you pursue further those threats you are making in the media. If there are issues with the contract, sit down, discuss it with the company. Maybe the environment has changed, the situation has changed also on the government side. But I think all of us, all companies are open to have such an honest and straightforward discussion, but not in a way like, we talk about putting people in jail, expropriating companies, etc., etc. So that's, as a foreign investor, we're a little bit scared by that. I hope there is no media here. Maybe I should have asked that at the beginning. Okay, thank you.
Can we hear from the players, the brokers?
I'm a shareholder of, very, very small shareholder of one of these companies that has been targeted. And we are the Shareholders Association of the Philippines. And I thought one of the expectations that the members should have is for Sharefield to stand up for the shareholders. And share values have dropped dramatically in these 4 targeted companies: MVP Group, Ayala Group, Lopez, and even Kunsunhi. And I think it's not fair to small stockholders like me that the value of our investments are just removed just like that, because of certain things that are at best, I think, kuro-kuro. For example, I understand the water concession contracts were crafted by government, and they were bidded out as is where is, and bidders came to bid, and these 2 groups, Lopez and Ayala, who won those bids, and now it's being called onerous. UP Hub, Techno Hub arrangement is also being questioned now, and so many other things. So I think it's time for Sharefield to do what it is supposed to do to protect the shareholders. Our problem is that many of our members are also part of these companies that are targeted. We have DM Concern here, we have MVP here, we have Ayala there, and the only group that's not represented here is the Lopez Group. No? But shouldn't Sharefield take a stand? This is the reason for being of Sharefield.
Do you have any specific recommendations as to what Sharefield should do? Since you're also a member of Sharefield?
Well, a statement of concern that reputations are being damaged, reputations built for up to 190 years, by the stroke of by a responsible statement, these values are being affected. So my suggestion is for the board to consider issuing a statement of concern. Because all the other associations have not done that. And it seems like have not done that. And it seems like everybody is fearful and intimidated. But I can understand why the others don't, because they represent the companies that could be targeted. But Sharefield is an association of shareholders. And our shareholdings are being damaged.
Minority shareholders have suffered tremendous losses because of the actions that were not really thought of so thoroughly. So I don't know what else we need to do except maybe make a lot of noise, but I don't know. We have spoken, and I think the shares have gone down, but have also recovered a bit. It's the market. It's the market's reaction to the whole thing, and aside from the fact that we comment on the negative impact, what else can we do in terms of protecting the shareholders?
The thinking of the brokers, the financial advisors. Anyone want to comment in respect to the impact of these developments?
The whole tragedy about Ayala, MPI, DMC and so on is one thing, but which was not really noticed in recent time is the stock rights offering of Cemex. Cemex Philippines had an IPO at 750, book value about 550, and now they're issuing new shares at 1 peso 50 something, meaning all the investors who invested are losing a lot of money. If I remember it right, I wrote an article about it in the past in the column of Sharefield. Maybe we can make 2020 a year where we raise all these issues, because it's not only about the president. It's now so many other companies who do the same thing. They just don't care about the minority shareholders anymore. I think what we have to do is to get 100 new members so that the voice of Sharefield is really stronger and will be heard better in the public. That's all. Thank you.
So our topic today is sustainability. It's a buzzword. You hear it all over media, topics in fora, organizations, etc. And so I think it's about time that it does take center stage. With climate change, while climate change deniers continue to be so, there are also warriors alongside who say that, ask the question, how do corporations strike a balance between people, planet, and profit? So just an example, BlackRock, a big asset manager, has recently announced that they would be adopting sustainability investing in their core strategy. So as shareholders or as representatives of shareholders, especially minority shareholders, how do we make accountable our corporate investees? How does sustainability figure in our own investment strategies?
Dear Lord, today we just want to tell you that we love you and adore you. We praise and glorify you for the countless blessings you continue to bestow on us. Many of these we do not really, truly deserve. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for our life and good health. Many of your children do not even reach their 40s, and many more, much younger than most of us, suffer from debilitating illnesses. Thank you for the love of our families and friends. Many have no friends or have families with no love. Thank you for the blessings of talent, good circumstances, and wherewithals. Many, so many, never had or will never have all or any of this. In a broader sense, Lord, thank you for our economy, not ideal, but livable. Thank you for our leaders, especially for the good ones. As for the bad ones, they give us good reason to be more involved in our communities, in building our nation, and in transforming a better world. And not just to wait nor rely on others to do this for us. Finally, Lord, thank you for this imperfect world. Otherwise, we will all get old and fat just sitting around and getting bored. By giving us an unjust world, you open our eyes to the many wrongs and injustices that cry for vindication. Thank you, Lord, for the chance to act, to right these wrongs. By bearing to us the many inequalities and inequities, you make us understand our reason for being in this world, which is to serve humanity. Dearest Lord, pave the way for us to act and to serve, to fulfill your divine will. Amen.
Our association has been led for the past 6 years by President Francis Lim, and I have been elected as the new president to replace Francis. And I would like to take this occasion to thank Francis for the service, the dedicated service that he has given to the association for the past 6 years. Now, the accomplishments of Sharefield for the last 10 years of its existence, we were organized in 2010, was summarized by Francis during his report to the members in November. And we will not repeat those accomplishments. They are available, I think, in the Sharefield website if you would like to take a look at them. But what we'd like to let you know is that for this year, the board will continue on the programs that Francis has made. And for this year, we have adopted our theme, which is Better Shareholders through Sharefield. We're also adopting or renewing the statement of purpose of Sharefield. And I would like to read that to you. I have the notes here just to make sure I read the statement of purpose properly. The purpose of Sharefield is to educate, equip, and empower investors to create and build wealth, thus propelling and sustaining socio-economic growth. That's our statement of purpose. And our programs for 2020 will be towards the establishment of those statements of purpose. So again, those are the things I'd like to inform the membership about. And again, I would like to thank you for attending this meeting and for us to look forward to 2020 as a productive year for the Shareholders Association of the Philippines. Thank you.
Okay, as mentioned by...
There's one very important item that I missed. I'd like to take this occasion to award a Leadership Appreciation Award plaque to our past president, immediate past president, Attorney Francisco Edlim. And if I may call on Francis here, just Leadership Appreciation Award presented to Attorney Francisco Edlim for his outstanding vision and dedicated service as Sharefield President from 2012 to 2019. Attorney Lim has been instrumental in the growth of Sharefield and the success of its programs, bringing Sharefield at the forefront of advocating for the improvement of the welfare of minority shareholders. Given this 22nd day of January 2020 at the Dusit Thani, Manila, Makati City, signed Evelyn R. Singson, Chairperson, Alfredo B. Parungao, President. May I invite Mrs. Singson to come and join.
It was the collective effort of everybody, especially the Board of Trustees, who unselfishly devoted their time and even resources to getting Sharefield where we are today. I have no doubt that President Fred will do a much better job. And when I decided to step down, not because I knew I would be taking the presidency of NAP, but because of another reason, which still remains confidential up to date, until this day. Fred and the rest of the board will do a better, in fact, a much better job than me. I committed to the board that I will continue supporting Sharefield the way I did before. Thank you very much.
So I guess the office to which you have been elected is one of dignity and importance. In accepting this office, you undertake a responsibility which is not to be assumed lightly nor carelessly discharged. You are charged with the duties of resolutely furthering the mission of the Shareholders Association of the Philippines. With the bylaws as your guide, you must be ever ready to exercise the function of the office with which you are entrusted. Do you accept this charge? I, and state your name, having been elected as of the Shareholders Association of the Philippines, do solemnly swear to abide by and uphold its Constitution and bylaws, to commit and to put into practice its core values and noble tenets of fairness, accountability, independence, transparency, and honor. I likewise pledge to advance the interests of the investing public to which this association is dedicated, and to conduct myself in a manner benefiting of a true proponent and advocate of good governance without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. Congratulations and thank you.
We do have some new members to induct, I believe, and again, as suggested by Alfred earlier, we'd like to broaden the membership of Sharefield to have more advocates to work for the interests of our stakeholders. So I'd like to call on Noel to introduce our new inductees.
Okay. We are honored to formally induct the following members to the Shareholders Association of the Philippines. First, may I call in front Mr. Florian Gotlin. Florian. Mr. Butch Ordeñez. Butch. Mr. Bernhard Chai. And Mr. Raymond Ricafort. So may I request Fred to come in front to induct the new members.
I, your name please, having been accepted as a member of the Shareholders Association of the Philippines, do solemnly swear to abide by and uphold its articles of incorporation and bylaws, to commit and put into practice its core values and noble tenets of fairness, accountability, independence, transparency, and honor. I pledge to help promote the awareness of shareholder rights through responsible advocacy and shareholder education, and in so doing, contribute to the building of investors' confidence and contribute to the development of the capital markets. This I pledge without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. And by virtue of the powers vested in me as an inducting officer, I now formally admit you as new members of the Shareholders Association of the Philippines. Congratulations. And
Congratulations to our new members. In the interest of time, may I suggest that you welcome them at the end of the meeting.
Jose Teodoro Limcauco, or TG, is the Chief Finance Officer, Chief Risk Officer, Chief Sustainability Officer of Ayala Corporation. He's a Director of Globe Telecom, Integrated Microelectronics, and BPI, and an Independent Director of the SSI Group. TG joined Ayala Corporation as Managing Director in 1998. Currently, he is the President and CEO of AC Ventures Holdings, Inc., and a member of the board of various Ayala Group companies, including its energy, healthcare, and infrastructure subsidiaries. Prior to his appointment as CFO in April of 2015, he held various responsibilities, including President of BPI Family Savings Bank, President of BPI Capital Corporation, Officer in charge for Ayala Life Assurance, Inc. and Ayala Plans, Inc., Trustee and Treasurer of Ayala Foundation, Inc., President of MyAyala.com, and CFO of Azalea Technology Investments, Inc. He served as the President of the Chamber of Thrift Banks from 2013 to 2015. He has held prior positions with JP Morgan and Company and BZW Asia. In 2017, TG was named as the ING Phoenix CFO of the Year. He graduated from Stanford University with a BS Mathematical Sciences, an honors program, in 1984, and from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania with an MBA in Finance and Investment Management in 1988. In our financial world, TG is recognized to be a truly learned and yet always curious man, a thought leader, unafraid to delve into topics of sensitivity, a gentleman who takes the time to listen and be kind. Please welcome Mr. TG Limcauco.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I've known Francis for now counting 33 years. He is ninong to one of my kids. I'm ninong to one of his kids. We've had lots of arguments over the years, whether it was about whether the 76ers would actually win a game when we were there, or whether the Eagles would ever do anything, to today's current discussions on what is the role of a shareholder in a company. We've had this discussion many times, and I've always said, you know, Francis, your advocacy with Shareholder Philippines, SharePhil, I want to address them, and I want to pose these questions to them because I come from the other side, and I have very different views. And so finally, he's invited me to come, and this morning when I was telling my team that I was going to speak to SharePhil, they actually said, teach, just be careful of your expectations. Don't expect a full ballroom, because when Jaime and Fernando spoke, that was the only time they had a full ballroom, and you're not Jazza or FZA. But it's a great pleasure that I came here, and lots of friends, familiar faces. Obviously, Evelyn here, your chairman, is someone I've negotiated with practically my whole life. Many deals that I've worked, both from the Ayala side, from the Rotary side, from the family side. Talking with Evelyn, I think she's one of the most tough business persons in the Philippines. And I just love dealing with her. Lots of friends here. JJ was my senior at Ateneo, and I've always known JJ as the guy who could out-talk anyone else in a room. So today I wanted to talk a little about my view on shareholder, but also to link it with sustainability and with strategy. And then leave some time for questions, many of the burning questions that you probably have that I refused to answer in the opening when Boots came up, but happy to answer them as we delve into the more touchy topics of the day. And you will understand that when Mignon introduced me, I am not a director of Manila Water. I am not a director of Ayala Land. So I stay safe. I'm Globe and BPI. But as Mignon said, my training is math. I'm a mathematician at heart by training. I'm a very logical person. And that's why I like finance. My whole life has been a banker of finance. And when I was brought back to Ayala in 2015, they said, you will be chief finance officer. And then within one day, I was made chief risk officer, and then they threw in chief sustainability officer. And in the last 4 years, I've been trying to integrate, into my thinking, why is sustainability important, and why does it drive value? And try to put that in a logical manner that would make sense to a mathematician. Because sustainability is today's buzzword, right? Everyone wants to talk about sustainability. And the reality is, I don't think anyone understands what it means. Everyone thinks it means climate change, right? Everyone thinks it means a good governance. Well, it's actually a lot of that, right? So let's go to Copenhagen. I'm in Copenhagen. I'm meeting one of my largest investors, and I'm going through the whole results of Ayala and what our strategy is. And the meeting is going extremely well. We're in the meeting for an hour. We're winding up. We're already talking about where I will have lunch and whether, what are the good restaurants in Copenhagen. And these three very senior portfolio managers almost apologetically come to me and say, we just have one more question to raise with you. And the room goes silent. And the two of them turn to the oldest guy, clearly the most senior, and he says, TG, I just need to ask you about your sustainability rating. Right? Your sustainability rating with MSCI, which was the agency they used, was a C. And I said, wait, the only time I ever got a C was in physics. Right? And I was totally blindsided. I didn't know we had been rated by MSCI. I didn't know that the rating was a C. Right? I didn't know what a C rating meant. Right? And so I said, let me look into it. And they went on to explain why it was important, because in their policies, they were now going towards sustainability. And in their policies, every fund that they managed would need to meet a minimum sustainability grade. So they would do it by weighted average of the holdings times the rating, and everything else being equal, if Ayala is good as company A, and company A had a rating of B, and Ayala had a C, Ayala gets dropped off. It's that simple to them, right? So, next story is now some Norwegians come into Manila, and they ask me the first question: what does Ayala do about ESG? Now let's remember this is 2015, right? And my answer to them was, what is ESG? Right? So it was really a completely embarrassing point for me that I really had to delve into it and try to understand the importance of responsible investing. You look at the principles of responsible investing, over 2,500 fund managers have actually signed up to it, to adhere to it. Over $90 trillion of assets under management now adhere to the principles of responsible investing. And this really started from a long time ago, started in the 70s when people said we can't invest in South Africa because of apartheid. But today it's gone full circle, and responsible investing really encompasses ESG, responsibility to the environment, responsibility to society or to social goals, and good governance. And unfortunately, most of us people, when we think about here, when people think about sustainability, it's always about climate change, right? Because it's sexy, right? Climate change is sexy and it's easy to understand. But I think people need to go forward and really understand ESG, and let me go through what ESG is. What is environmental, social, and good governance? And why is this important? Because in reality, I don't know. In reality, what's happened is that for many years, corporations felt that philanthropy was good enough, right? And what is philanthropy? Philanthropy is, I have excess money, let me feel good by giving it to someone else. That's philanthropy. Let me help someone else by giving my excess money. And yeah, that works for many people. But in reality, as people moved on, you began to have the sense that you needed to be a responsible member of your community. So corporate social responsibility began to take off, and then you began to become part of the community. You were responsible to the community. You made sure that the people around you were treated fairly, right? Your goals were aligned with your community. But never did people begin to think that this was part of the business model. And so the new thinking came where it's creating shared value. And what is creating shared value? Creating shared value is making sure that your business model fixes a societal problem. And a business model must be innovative, right? So you must address a problem in scale with innovation. And that's your business model. Only if you're able to do this can you really begin to build a sustainable model. And therefore, we know today that people are beginning to say that maximizing shareholder value is not the goal, right? In late 2018, the Business Roundtable in the US, a group of 200 CEOs, came out and said, this maxim of maximizing shareholder value, proposed by Milton Friedman, that most of us in this room believe in, or believed in, is no longer the goal of management, right? And that has caught fire. That now people are beginning to say, no, a corporation must have a responsibility to society, a corporation must have ethics, all true, right? What I want to propose is two things from an article that that resonated with me. There was a Harvard article written in 2017 where two Harvard professors began to challenge, the concept of what a corporation or what management's responsibility is. And the concept is, what is the role of a shareholder? What does a shareholder, and this is important for Sharefill, is what are your rights? Are you an owner of a corporation? And the thesis is, and I subscribe to this thesis, and this is the heart of my argument with Francis, is that the shareholder is not an owner, right? Because an owner must have two things. An owner must have access, and an owner must have responsibility. As a shareholder, as an owner of a dog, you can feed your dog anytime, right? As an owner of an apartment, you can go to your apartment anytime, right? As an owner of a dog, you're responsible if your dog bites me. As an owner of an apartment, of a building, you're responsible if the building falls in an earthquake, right? As a shareholder, you do not have access to my office, right? You can all be shareholders of Ayala, as I hope all of you are, but you do not have access to my office. You cannot come to my office and say, I want to sit in your toilet anytime, right? Nor do you have any responsibility. As Ayala, as a shareholder of Ayala, if Ayala were to do something wrong, you have no responsibility. You are not criminally liable. You are not legally liable for actions of the company as a shareholder, right? The second issue with thinking of a shareholder as an owner is that owners have different objectives, right? Some owners want to make money very quickly. You want value to rise very quickly. Other owners want very long-term. There is a conflict between a fund manager who owns it on my behalf. So I may have a fund, I may be an owner. There you go. I may have a fund with a fund manager. My objective is to prepare for my money in that fund to grow so that when I retire in 20 years, I will have enough money to retire. The guy managing the fund has only one objective, to keep his job. And his job is to make sure he performs every quarter. So those two objectives are completely different, right? And therefore, there is this disconnect. And therefore, I would posit that a shareholder is just the beneficiary of the economic returns of a company, right? Sure, you get the economic returns of the company, but you are not an owner. So the role of management is to make sure that those economic returns are good for you, right? And now a company, by its very nature, is a unique being. Because a company, unlike our natural lives, a company does not have an end of life. A company can last forever, right? And therefore, if you believe that a company can last forever, the corporation is the perfect vehicle for making long-term investments that change society, because there is no need to get this quick return, right? And therefore, the company can maximize value. If you think about maximizing value, if you believe a company has an end of life, then at the end of the life, the company has zero value, right? And therefore, the role of management is to make sure that the company lives forever. That's the only way you can maximize value, by thinking of keeping the company going forever. Very similar to the way we treat our lives and our children. You can make a decision that your children will disagree with you, but you're only making it for the good long-term benefit of your child. When you tell your son, don't drink and drive, right? That's for his long-term benefit. It may not be cool for his date that night, right? But long-term, it's good for him. And that's the role of management. Management must balance the needs of everyone who benefits from the company. I talk about the shareholder having the economic benefits. The government gets the tax benefits. The community gets the societal benefits. The employees get the payroll benefits. The environment gets, what the benefits or the harm from producing. All these must be balanced by management to ensure that the company lasts forever, because that's the only way you can maximize value. And therefore, the role of management, really, is to manage for the long term. Because if we don't make these investments for the long term, then we don't progress. We don't progress at all, right? So if you believe this, if you buy into this, many questions arise. For example, if shareholders are not owners, is the mantra of one share, one vote still valid? Right? Because if you're not owners, is it still valid? Shareholders can force the board to make decisions, and yet right after the board makes a decision that the shareholder wants, the shareholder can sell. Right? And therefore, the shareholder has no responsibility for the actions he forces management to take. Is that fair? So those are questions that have troubled me and have given me a lot of thought in thinking about sustainability. And therefore, for me, sustainability really to maximize value is just to think about the corporation and running the corporation so it lasts forever. It's rather simplistic, but I think if management always thinks of the long term rather than the short term, and by balancing all the competing needs of all the stakeholders, then you begin to achieve that goal. The rest of the presentation really is talking about at Ayala. Our strategy really is to solve of new businesses, is finding a societal issue that we want to fix. For example, in the last 5 years, we've really focused on education and healthcare because we think those are problems that need to be fixed. And we are trying to fix it with a business model that's profitable. Otherwise, our shareholders complain because you get negative economic benefits, right? Annual report, which is very focused on results and financials, integrating reporting, and as Shareful, I think we should begin to insist that corporations begin to follow this format. It's a more holistic approach where you even begin to talk about your outlook and you begin to explain your business model rather than just explaining your results. We talk about our business model, how we create value. We talk about all the strategies we implement, both from financial, the thesis we have. We talk about our outlook. In our integrated report, we have a section where we actually put what our thesis is for the next 5 years, what will happen to this world, and why we believe this is to be so. And because we believe this is to be so, this is where we're making investments, and these are the businesses we're doing. So it's a very holistic approach, and it's really communicating this to investors, because we're beginning to see that this is what investors are demanding from the companies. For example, people are beginning to talk about environmental concerns. Investors want to see what we're doing about the environment. So we report our greenhouse gas emissions. We report amount electricity we consume, the water we consume. And it's important that it be complete and comparable. So we always say this is what it was last year so that we can track progress or lack of progress, because that's what investors want. And then finally, I wanted to touch really on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is sort of like the best invention to come out of the United Nations. Maybe even ahead of world peace, right? Because this finally is something that they have formed that resounds and redounds very well with everyone across the globe, from the investor community to the corporations. And it's really nothing more than a set of 17 goals, actually 16, because goal number 17 is kind of flaky, partnership for the goals. It's 16 goals that they think are world problems that we want to solve by 2030. And it's great because first, it's a great graphic, so everyone loves it, right? But also, it simplifies the issues that we're trying to fix, not only environmentally, but also from a social point of view and from a governance point of view. And this is great because we use this not only to communicate with our investors what we're doing, but we use it to communicate with the organization. Clearly, if your strategy is a sustainable strategy, you cannot make that just stay with top management. You need to make sure that that goes to everyone in the organization, right? And the reality is, if you can get your organization to believe that what you are doing is good for the world or good for people, it's so much easier to get people to work for you and to wake up every day. I mean, it's so obvious that all our employees are willing to spend the weekend painting a schoolhouse, cleaning a hospital, delivering relief goods to Batangas or Taal for no pay. And yet these are the same people who will complain when you ask them to stay an extra hour to finish work. Right? People want to do good. And if you can frame your strategy, if you can frame the objective of your company under one of these goals, it makes so much more sense for your people, and then you can get your business going. At Ayala, we've basically said, each company, pick only one or two. Name them, and then let's build a framework for the whole group as to what we are trying to do. So this is what we tell the whole organization. As the group, we're trying to solve 3 big Philippine problems. And for me, it's very easy. Poor, middle class, rich, right? We want to move people from who are marginalized and include them. So there we talk about healthcare, we talk about poverty alleviation, education, and clean water. The middle class, people with, we are a very talented nation, but the middle class has untapped potential. We want them to be productive and competitive. So you offer them financing, you offer them telecom, you offer them decent housing. And then finally, for the more fortunate of us, our problem is we are irresponsible consumers. We have irresponsible growth, and we need to fix that. So we look at climate change, we look at good manufacturing, we look at clean energy. So it's a very simple rubric that we use, a very simple metric, but this is what we communicate in and out, and this is something we launched 2 years ago within the group to try to really push this and make sure that our objectives at the top, which is a good business, a sustainable business, gets executed at the bottom. I think it's also very fitting. Oh, We also report the objectives every year and what we do, because what gets reported gets achieved. We quantify it, because if it's not measured, nothing ever happens, so you need to measure. In Copenhagen, this was the wall of the investor, that investors themselves have said these are the same goals that we need to achieve as investors. Right? So it's on their wall. It's their goals as well. And people ask me, why is AC Energy all of a sudden making this huge pivot from coal to renewable energy? It's not only because it's good business, but you can see the writing on the wall. Banks are not financing thermal energy. Insurance companies don't want to insure coal plants anymore because their investors are also looking at this. So this thing is going to get bigger and bigger as more investors focus on sustainability, and therefore you need to pay attention to your shareholders, even though they are not owners, but only economic beneficiaries, because that's where you get your capital from. And so at Ayala, we've set these goals for 2030. The CEOs have said, why 2030? None of us will be here anymore because we're all old, right? All of us are retiring in the next 4 or 5 years. But the reality is we need to begin setting organizations in place that can achieve these goals. Because truly, if you think about it, we are not remembered for what we do, right? You're really remembered for what you leave behind. And that's the objective. And that's why, to me, sustainability is very important. This is where I usually end the talk. And happy to take questions about my advocacy, my belief in this, why it's very important for Ayala, but also happy to take questions about anything else. Thank you.
So would anyone want to challenge or, react?
You have not, for the last 30 minutes, mentioned anything about governance. And the Sharefield, ICD, and a few other advocacies have been pushing for governance because that is what the boards of directors do. They direct and they control the corporation. And the CEO and the management team manages the corporation. Your presentation has been heavy on management and did not touch at all. And many of the audience here are ICD fellows, so they know what I'm talking about. So I agree that management executes, but it's the board that approves strategies formulated or proposed by management. And once the board approves, management executes, and the board monitors. So the board has a very important role to play in the affairs of the corporation. Your presentation seems to focus more on just management, but not the board, and even less so the shareholders. So I'm not sure whether your dangerous assertions can be divided, because really, to me, up to now, I think it's really the board of directors that are accountable for the corporation. And yes, management is powerful, does the execution, they're compensated for doing that. No? But I don't think it's correct to belittle the role of the board or the role of governance. I'm still lost in the definition of ownership because, yes, shareholders own the company.
Rex, you're absolutely right. The board is the representative of the shareholders because the shareholders represent the board. Sorry, the shareholders elect the board, right? But once that election is made, I think the board has a fiduciary duty for the company rather than the shareholders, right? Now, governance is certainly part of ESG. I dwell very little on it because I think of the E, the S, and the G, that is where the world is most developed in. There are very good practices already. There are advocates that go for it. And most companies buy into it, right? That you have good governance, that the board understands the role, that the board has independent directors, that all these things. And yeah, if you look at the report, there is a whole section on governance. So I'm not saying that you poo-poo governance. I think that's why it's ESG. In fact, my thinking is that E is very sexy today. G has been well known. A lot of people forget the S part. A lot of people forget the S part. And so the thesis I have is that the board is elected by the shareholders, but the board's fiduciary duty is to keep the company going. And if they keep the company going, that automatically maximizes shareholder value without naturally thinking about it. Because then you automatically have to make those trade-offs against short-term gains versus long-term capex expenses, right? There's always this trade-off, a short-term profit. And you have to always think about the long-term. Because shareholders have very different demands or desires. But I don't think at all that sustainability means giving up on governance. Not at all.
So I think there's still ownership, but I think it's responsible ownership. Ownership that does just not ask for return of profits. But in fact, if you look around, it's so difficult, I think, if the company is so widely held and there's no majority shareholder, the risk that it's pros and cons probably, but there are also advantages that the corporation has majority stockholders who will steer the company and lead it to where it is. But I think a statement saying that stockholders are not owners are too sweeping.
How can they be owners if they don't have responsibility? If the company misbehaves, a shareholder has no legal liability. They might lose. They might lose the vote, and then what happens, right? Yeah. So it's a great concept. I mean, it's food for thought. It's food for thought. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying this is what has made me change a lot of my thinking. I certainly respect every investor who comes and talks to me and asks me why we're doing, but I also understand them when they say, I don't agree with you guys, and therefore I'm selling. Right? And that's their prerogative. And many of our investors have said, we're in, as you said, because we buy in the long-term vision. In fact, this is the other thing that's gotten me, this one share, one vote. There's so many arguments for it and against it, or there are many arguments also why it doesn't necessarily have to hold true. Right? It's quite interesting where you have a company, the third largest company in the world, Google, it's not one share, one vote. Right? And yet it works very well because stewardship is entrusted. Right?
What you seem to be saying is that while shareholders are the owners of the shares, they're not the owners of the corporation. Okay? And their share ownership represents their beneficial interest in the corporation. That's okay?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
What you're saying is that to make a corporation truly sustainable, we have to think of the corporation as the focus, okay, the focal point. Yes. And when we do that, it benefits everybody, okay, including society, because of the movement on ESG and so on and so forth, the so-called stakeholder principle. Because I also was, one of the first things that you convinced me on is that shareholders have divergent, in fact, conflicting interests, like what you said, a portfolio manager versus a long-term investor and so on and so forth. But it's a very interesting topic. It's an advocacy and which may call into play an amendment of the corporation code. If that as a student of the law, that's what attracts me to your theory. No? I know we have had discussions, but I was thinking about it. It's really, you're distinguishing the shareholder from the corporation. In fact, under our law, the shareholders have different legal personality. Yes. And the way I'm trying to reconcile what you're saying is ownership of the shares, not necessarily ownership of the corporation. Yes. Okay. Now I get you.
Okay. You can actually think about a mutual fund, right? Which a mutual fund is a corporation that buys into other corporations. And the owners of the mutual fund, the investors, cannot tell the fund manager what to do. Right? Who owns the mutual fund? The investors. and yet they have no power over the mutual fund managers what to do. All they can do is leave or put more money in.
The big question is a corporation is an inanimate thing, you know. It's still at the end, you know, run by people. Now, the management we look at as the ones, you know, who will make sure that all stakeholders, you know, behave in a way and contribute in a way to sustain the life of the corporation. And the issue of ultimately who is in control of management. You know, in family corporations, you have the controlling family that does it. And it's natural in many families to think of future generations. So in fact, there are studies that show that family corporations are doing better than corporations that are widely held, you know, because there is a family that has a natural tendency to be concerned about sustainability because they have future generations to worry about. Whereas in a widely dispersed ownership corporation, you just have managers who have very short-term perspectives because they're only concerned about their bonuses at the end of the year, you know, and which brought down so many companies during the the financial crisis in the U.S. Okay, so yes, corporations can be viewed as you know, an entity. In fact, when I was running UP, for example, we have representative, and when I represented ADB on the board of companies, I say I shed my hat. I may remove my hat as an ADB person, but only decide on the basis of what will be good for the corporation as an entity, not for what will be good by the investor that I represent. The same way, you know, that in universities, you know, you have student representative on the board, you have faculty representative, admin representative. And I always remind them, when I co-chair of the board, that their role there is not really to represent the interest of the sectors that put them on the board, you know, but provide the perspective of their sectors in making sure that the university thrive as an entity. So, in a way, I could see the thesis, and I subscribe to it, that everybody should work towards sustaining the corporation. And the last point I'd like to raise is when we talk of sustainability, it's as if the corporation needs to sacrifice something, you know, because it's something, it's a higher goal, and they have to sacrifice everything. In fact, that's not the case, you know, because we worry about sustainability, we work towards sustainability because it makes business sense. Okay, I think that's what people have to keep in mind, you know, that sustainability is important because it makes business sense. It means it will sustain the corporation being, you know, a productive corporation and generating profits for all the stakeholders.
Integrated reporting is now the trend. It's more holistic. You talk not only about what you've done, but how you see the future. And finally, that this is there's no way back, turning back, because this is what funders, investors demand. That you report on the basis that you adopt sustainability strategies in the corporation. So having said that, may I request Fred Perungo to give our small token and share evidence. And may we thank you for joining us